Welcome to Life Stories, where a single piece of jewelry unravels a lifetime of lies. Imagine discovering that the ring you've worn every day, gifted by the man you once loved, isn't just stolen, but worth over $2 million and tied to a legacy you never knew you were born to protect. This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about inheritance, not of wealth, but of courage, of uncovering truths buried by generations, and of a woman forced to choose between the safety of silence and the cost of stepping into who she truly is. If you've ever wondered what you would do when love, legacy, and danger collide, this story will stay with you long after the final scene. Let's go back to where it all began, with a ring, a whisper, and a name long forgotten. Grace Whitaker had never believed in omens. Not in the way people read into dreams or broken clocks or birds tapping at windows, but something about the way the elderly jeweler's hand trembled as he held her sapphire ring made her stomach twist with unease. "You have no idea what you've been carrying," Mr. Whitmore whispered, his magnifying glass slipping from his fingers and landing on the velvet-lined counter with a soft thud. The elegant stillness of Whitmore and Sons, an old-world jewelry store nestled in the heart of Fairhaven, Massachusetts, was shattered by his words. Behind them, a soft stream of Debussy played through antique brass speakers, the delicate piano notes clashing against the tension now thickening in the air. Grace furrowed her brow. "Excuse me?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he stood, more quickly than a man his age should have, and vanished into the back office, the ring still in his hand. Alone at the counter, Grace could hear him behind the half-closed door, frantic whispers, drawers opening, papers rustling. Then a sharp, metallic clack, like a safe being shut. Her fingers curled involuntarily, already missing the cool weight of the ring she'd worn nearly every day for the past 2 years. Outside, the silence broke again. Red and blue lights flared across the display windows. A police cruiser parked at the curb. Then another. She stood, heart skipping. That couldn't be for her. It was just a ring. A beautiful antique ring that her ex-boyfriend Jake had given her on their second anniversary. Sentimental, yes. A relic from a failed relationship, sure. But enough to summon the police? The bell above the shop's door jingled lightly. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. Their eyes scanned the room and landed on her. "Ma'am," the taller one said, hand resting near his holster, "we need you to come with us." From the back room, Mr. Whitmore emerged. His face was pale, his eyes avoiding hers. In his hands, sealed in a clear evidence bag, was her ring. "I'm sorry," he said softly, not looking at her. "You have no idea what you've been wearing." Grace had always found comfort in the past. As a history teacher at Fairhaven High, her world revolved around dusty archives, vintage maps, and footnotes that connected moments across centuries. She believed in truth, in context, in cause and effect. That belief unraveled in the fluorescent-lit interview room of the Fairhaven Police Department, where Detective Eli Monroe slid a photograph across the metal table. It showed her ring, sitting behind glass, displayed on a velvet pedestal inside the Smithsonian Museum. 3 years ago. "This ring," he said calmly, "is known as the Catherine Sapphire, valued at $2.4 million, stolen in one of the most sophisticated museum heists in recent American history." Grace blinked. "That's impossible. Jake gave me that ring. For our anniversary. He said it reminded him of my eyes." The second detective, Marla Jennings, leaned forward, arms crossed tightly. "When exactly did he give it to you?" 2 years ago. October. I remember because it was raining and we were supposed to go hiking but ended up cooking together instead. He made paella, and what does that matter? "It matters," Jennings said, "because Jake Prescott is under investigation by the FBI. Not just for this, but for connections to an international art theft ring operating out of New England." Grace's stomach dropped. "Look," she said, voice shaking now, "I didn't know anything about stolen art. I'm a teacher. I wear the same pair of flats until they fall apart. I thought it was vintage. He said he found it in a little shop in Vermont." "Did you ever question how he could afford it?" Monroe asked gently, "or why the shop never existed on any records?" The question landed like a punch because she hadn't asked. Because love makes you believe beautiful things come with simple explanations. Because she trusted Jake. I need to talk to him, she said. I need to know why. Monroe exchanged a look with Jennings, then nodded. We were hoping you'd say that. That night, back in the quiet of her grandmother's old house, the only place that had ever felt like home, Grace curled up on the worn couch, the air still thick with everything she'd learned. The ring, the museum, Jake. She barely noticed the nausea rising again, a sickness she'd chalked up to grief and stress. But as her body convulsed over the bathroom sink, her reflection pale and haunted in the mirror, a truth she'd been too afraid to name surfaced like a ghost. With trembling hands, she reached for the unopened pregnancy test in the cabinet. 5 minutes later, Grace sat on the edge of the bathtub, the pink lines staring up at her like a prophecy. Pregnant, with Jake's child, the man who may have lied about everything, the man who gave her a stolen artifact that might link her to a criminal conspiracy, the man who, against every good instinct she had, she might still love. The doorbell rang. Wiping her face, she moved like a sleepwalker through the hall. But when she opened the door, it wasn't the detectives. It was Mr. Whitmore, his face more drawn than it had been hours ago. I know it's late, he said, voice barely above a whisper, but I remembered something I think you need to see. He held out a small worn photograph, a sepia portrait of a Victorian woman, regal and sharp-eyed, a sapphire pendant at her throat. She's the original owner of the ring, he said. Charlotte Blackwell, a philanthropist, a fighter, and she reminds me of you. Grace stared at the image, something tugging at the edges of memory. Mr. Whitmore hesitated, then added, There's an engraving inside the band, faded, barely legible. 3 initials, C-E-T. Grace froze. Eleanor Thompson, her grandmother. What are you saying? She asked, voice barely steady. I'm saying, Mr. Whitmore replied, this ring might not just be stolen, it might be coming home. Have you ever discovered something precious that turned your world upside down? What would you do if the person you loved turned out to be the greatest mystery of your life? In the shadows of heritage and betrayal, Grace is about to uncover a legacy far older and far more dangerous than she ever imagined. Continue to part 2, where secrets buried in bloodlines rise to the surface. The journal was old, leather cracked at the spine, pages soft with age, ink faded but legible. Grace sat in her grandmother's study, the room dimly lit by a desk lamp that hummed softly against the night silence. Outside, rain tapped gently against the window panes, and the scent of lavender from Eleanor's favorite sachets lingered in the air like memory itself. She'd found the key tucked beneath a false bottom in the desk drawer, a key she now knew matched the hidden compartment described in Charlotte Blackwell's estate records. The journal had been sealed with a ribbon bearing the Blackwell crest, and Eleanor's handwriting filled the margins with notes, dates, and underlined passages. For hours, Grace read, piecing together fragments of a history she'd never been told. Catherine Sapphire, Charlotte Blackwell, a collection, a vault, a bloodline, and then a final entry dated 2 days before her grandmother's heart attack. I fear I've run out of time. If Grace finds this journal, know that the ring is not a trinket. It is a key, and the legacy it unlocks belongs to her, if she's brave enough to claim it. Grace stared at the words, her hands trembling. Her entire life had been shaped by grief and longing. Parents lost young. A grandmother who loved fiercely but always carried something unsaid behind her eyes. And now, suddenly, she was the last thread in a legacy too vast to comprehend. A sharp knock broke the stillness. She jumped, heart-lurching. It was late. No one should be at the door. Moving cautiously through the house, she checked the peephole. A face she hadn't seen in months stood in the rain, soaked to the bone, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. Jake. She hesitated only a moment before opening the door. He looked like hell. Eyes bloodshot, lips pale, his usually crisp posture slouched with exhaustion or guilt. Maybe both. Grace, he said, his voice cracking. I didn't know where else to go. She didn't move, didn't invite him in. Her silence was the barrier. They're looking for me, he said. I didn't steal it, not directly. I swear. I never meant to drag you into this. You gave me a stolen ring worth millions, Jake, she said, her voice steady, cold. You did drag me in. He flinched. I didn't know, at first. I was told it was a reclaimed heirloom, that it had been taken unfairly generations ago, that giving it to you would set things right. I didn't understand what it was. Grace narrowed her eyes. Who told you that? He looked away. Brooke? Of course. Brooke Miller, her former best friend, now an investor in questionable art markets, always one step ahead of legality and two steps behind morality. Brooke had met Jake at one of Grace's birthday dinners, back when everything had still felt normal. Grace hadn't thought twice about their flirtation at the time. You were working with her? She whispered, fury rising in her chest. Not like that, he said quickly. At least, not at first. I didn't know who you were. Who you really were. Neither did she. But when we figured it out, when we saw your grandmother's obituary, the name, Brooke said it was fate, that returning the ring to a true Blackwell heir would make the provenance irrefutable. You gave me a stolen artifact to clean its history? Jake didn't deny it. He only looked at her with something between regret and desperation. I didn't expect to fall in love with you, he said. That wasn't the plan. Her breath caught. You still lied, she said quietly. I know. He stepped back, holding out a small velvet pouch. There's more. Brooke's after it. All of it. She found something. The vault. Or she thinks she has. She's dangerous, Grace. And you came here. Why? She asked, folding her arms over her chest. He hesitated, rainwater dripping from his sleeves. Because you're pregnant, he said. Her eyes snapped up. How do you know that? Jake swallowed. Because I overheard the detectives outside the station. I've been watching, making sure you're okay. The intrusion hit her like a slap. You were watching me? I didn't know what else to do, he shouted, then caught himself. I've made terrible choices. I won't deny it. But you and that baby, I just want to make things right. There was silence between them, filled only by the rain and the sound of something cracking inside her. Trust, maybe? Or the last illusion of safety. Go, she said. Turn yourself in. Tell the FBI everything. If you want to do something for this child, stop hiding. Jake stood there a long moment before nodding. As he turned to leave, he paused. She's not going to stop, Grace, he said, and she doesn't care who she burns along the way. Then he was gone. Grace stood at the door long after, the velvet pouch still in her hand. When she opened it, her breath caught. A second key, not to the ring's compartment, but to something deeper. A lock carved into Blackwell stone. If you found out your entire bloodline was tied to a treasure others would kill for, would you run from it or rise to claim it? As shadows gather around Grace's past and future, the legacy she's inherited threatens to rewrite everything she thought she knew. Don't miss what happens next in Part 3. The vault was colder than Grace expected. She stood in its arched doorway, the weight of generations pressing against her chest like stone. The second key, longer, older, with a blackened finish, had fit perfectly into the iron lock set into the far wall of Eleanor's cellar. And now the passage it revealed yawned open like a mouth from the past, quiet and waiting. She hesitated before stepping inside. Jake had turned himself in the week prior, offering everything he knew in exchange for leniency. The FBI took the bait. Brooke Miller had vanished. Her apartment emptied, her accounts drained. The woman who once toasted with champagne to legacy by force had become a ghost, slipping between borders and disguises. But Grace stayed, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she couldn't run anymore. The vault wasn't filled with gold or glittering jewels. It wasn't lined with velvet or locked treasure chests. What lay inside were shelves, carefully built into the stone itself, dozens of them. And on each shelf were journals, letters, blueprints, ledgers, names, the true Blackwell inheritance. She traced her fingers across one spine, dust lifting in soft curls. Property transfer, New York, 1894. Charitable endowment, Women's Clinic, 1912. Letters to Eleanor, 1967. Every volume was a fragment of a legacy her family had tried to preserve in silence. And as she opened the pages, Grace saw what Charlotte Blackwell had truly left behind. Not riches, but power. Quiet power. Intentional power. foundations designed to survive centuries, properties tucked into trusts beneath assumed names, educational funds granted to single mothers across generations. Women who had received help they didn't even know came from the same hand. Grace found a photograph tucked between the pages of a leather-bound notebook. A woman in early 20th century attire, holding a baby in her arms, standing in front of the very house Grace had grown up in. The caption was handwritten, elegant and steady. For Eleanor, may she always find her way back to herself. Grace sank to the stone floor, the photo clutched to her chest, the child in her womb pressing gently against her ribs. She cried, not just for her grandmother or her bloodline, or even the betrayal of the man she once loved, but for the sheer gravity of it all. She was no longer a keeper of memories. She was a continuation. When she finally stepped out of the vault, morning had already begun to stretch itself across the world. Sunlight poured through the cellar windows, warm and golden, bathing the old stone in a color that felt like hope. She didn't know how long she had been down there, but she knew something had shifted. She had shifted. 1 month later, Grace stood in the halls of the Fairhaven Museum, her belly now noticeably round, her breath shorter, her movement slower. The Catherine collection had finally come home, donated by her in partnership with the Smithsonian and a series of anonymous Blackwell family trusts. She insisted on that anonymity. Let the legacy speak, not the names. Mr. Whitmore stood beside her, dressed in a pressed gray suit, a rare formality for the jeweler who had been with her from the beginning. "You did well," he said softly. She would have been proud. Grace turned to look at the central display, the Catherine sapphire gleaming under museum lighting, surrounded by exhibits detailing Charlotte Blackwell's life and work. But next to it, mounted in a quiet glass case, was something far smaller, a copy of the photograph Grace had found in the vault. The caption below read, "Legacy is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers through blood." The public wouldn't know all the twists. Not the betrayals, the chases, or the pregnancy tests that had changed everything. But Grace would remember, and she would tell her daughter, someday. Later that night, as she sat on the edge of her bed, the baby kicked again, stronger this time. Grace smiled faintly and reached for her grandmother's locket, now restored and hung beside her hospital bag. Tucked inside were 2 photos, one of Eleanor, the other of Charlotte. There was a knock on the door. Not a loud one, tentative, familiar. She knew it before she opened it. Jake stood there, thinner, eyes heavier, but different. Free. He had served 60 days under house arrest with strict conditions, his cooperation buying him the thinnest edge of redemption. But tonight, he wasn't there to fix anything. He stood without expectation. "I won't stay," he said. "I just wanted to see if you were okay." Grace studied him for a long moment. "I'm not angry anymore," she said quietly. Jake's breath caught. "I don't expect forgiveness." "I know." She paused. "But you should know. I named her Charlotte Eleanor. She'll have both of them." His eyes welled. Thank you." They stood in the porch light, 2 people who had broken each other in ways neither fully understood and loved each other in ways they might never again. Jake started to turn, then hesitated. "She'll be amazing," he said, "because she's yours." Grace watched him walk away. And for the first time in months, she didn't feel loss. She felt peace. She closed the door behind her, her hand resting over her child, and whispered, "Let me tell you a story." Because that's what women like Charlotte had always done. And now, it was her turn. What part of Grace's journey touched your heart the most? Comment 100 if this story moved you. Tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Share this with someone who believes in the strength of quiet legacy. Thank you for watching Life Stories.